What is up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another live stream. My name's Lewis, also known as MrCameraJunkie, where I remind you to upgrade your skills before your gear. And today we're going to be talking about Sony's new unveiling of their APS-C lens lineup in the wide angle lenses. But before I start getting into my soliloquies and into my rant, as always, I would like to thank you for taking the time and spending it here with me. This is week number 79. Next week will be 80 weeks consecutive of the Camera Junkie live stream. Big stuff there, so super excited for that. Just another milestone, just another live stream, just another hangout, just like we do every Saturday night. So let me see who is here. Okay, right off the bat, we have John saying good evening. We also have Melanie. Thank you for stopping by. Paul, Mr. Moderator's here in the house. And I will just have to thank you guys for stopping by. I have to honestly tell you, I literally lost track of time just taking care of Aiden. I was here, and then the next thing you know, I'm like, it's 11:03. I literally just lost the track of time just there at the end. But hey, Sammy, thank you for stopping by. But with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. This past Wednesday, and usually we get announcements on Tuesdays, but this past Wednesday, I guess they just wanted to hold off to make it a June instead of a May, announcement. Sony unveiled to us their latest lineup of APS-C lenses. So now, just to preface, if you're not familiar with the difference between APS-C and full frame cameras, or even know the difference of what I'm talking about, it all has to do with the sensor size. So the sensor size is basically the biggest component dependent on the size of lens that you would have to adapt to it. So even though we used to carry around DSLR cameras when we went mirrorless, that allowed us to make lenses shorter as far as flange distance, so we were able to make them more compact, but the actual size and weight wasn't all that different. Now with APS-C, that is where it changes a little bit more, because the smaller sensor allows it to be a lot smaller as far as the total build. One of the things that we've never really had in this APS-C lineup is a good set of fast glass, which is, I'll get into that if you're not familiar with that term, but fast glass just means that it has a very low aperture and it allows a lot of light in. And the reason why we call that fast is because in photography, that would require you to actually increase your shutter speed, making it a lot faster so that you can get a proper exposure. But with that being said, we've never really had fast primes or anything like it available natively from Sony in their APS-C lineup of cameras. And you're talking about over 10 years and that they've been doing APS-C mirrorless cameras with the E-mount. Now, what they released was a trio of lenses, one of them being the 11mm lens. That one's at an f1.8, so that's still really fast and considered a prime, and it being 11mm with a 1.5 crop factor will give you the equivalent of a 22mm lens, more like a 21.5, but no need to nitpick. It is ample wide, and it being, like I said, a fast prime at f1.8, it's going to allow you to get a lot of light onto that sensor, allowing you to bring your ISO down and get the best type of image. And if you are interested in vlogging, and that's the type of video recording that you're doing, then this could be the lens for you, because there's nothing like it on the market. The only thing that you could find even available was I believe it's a Samyang or it's a Mikey. Actually, neither of those. It's three companies that get mixed in the in the Kool-Aid there. It's actually a Rokinon. So a Rokinon lens, that's a 12mm, but it's a manual focus. So good luck trying to really use it for vlogging, because any movement that you do will quickly get you out of focus using a manual lens. Now, it's good if you wanted to do kind of like real estate or something of that sort, but that's why I think that if that's something that you've been interested in, then this could be the lens for you. Another lens that they have come out is their 15mm f1.4. Now, prior to this lens being available, the only lens that you could even find remotely within that range is the lens that I use for every single live stream, is what you're seeing right now, is the 16mm f1.2 f1.4, my apologies. And it's the f1.4 from Sigma. Sigma actually had a trio of lenses, the 16mm f1.4, the 30mm f1.4, and the 56 f1.4. With that is a really good set of primes that you can get, and it was pretty much the go-to for any Sony shooter that's been using APS-C within the last 10 years. Like, I can more than guarantee you that any Sony shooter that's been using their camera APS-C for more than a year within the last 10 years has come across one of those three lenses. I have two of them. Actually, this one right here is the 30mm f1.4, and I absolutely love them. But they really wanted to, put a hurting, so to speak, or not put a hurting, but like show their dominance and technology on the competition. So they brought out this 15mm f1.4, so you're gonna get the same type of speed or aperture for the lens, but then they made it just a little bit wider at 15, just to like get that one up on them. And then on top of that, they made it much more compact and lighter, which is what really interests me, because I've said it myself, I absolutely love the Sigma 16mm f1.4, but it is the same size, if not bigger, than some of my full frame lenses. Like, this lens is heavier and larger than my 56mm Zeiss f1.8. That's why I said it's an amazing piece of kit. I love that glass, that's in front of that sensor, but at the end of the day, it is pretty big. Now, I don't mind for the quality and the image that I get from it, but that's where you have to really, pick your battles, because at the end of the day, I also probably wouldn't recommend this lens so much for vlogging setup, because it's so big and front heavy. Now, the go-to vlogging lens prior to this new announcement was Sony's own 10 to 18 f4 with the OSS. Now, this was never considered a G lens, but when it did come out in 2013, it did win a plethora of awards for being, the sharpest lens in that category and lineup. I'm not sure if it was just because it could have been probably the only lens in that category, but nonetheless, I did own that lens, and I can attest to its sharpness, and it actually has pretty good optical steady shot, what we call OSS, and for that reason, that's why it's preferred by a lot of people who have been using Sony APS-C cameras for vlogging. Miss Diana Gladney actually really likes that lens for that same functionality. She uses her 35mm Sony for most of her recorded content, but when it comes to vlogging, she loves her 10 to 18, and it just wasn't my favorite. Now, I used to have that lens and I sold it because of it. I wanted to invest in other lenses. With that being said, Sony still one up themselves. Now they came out with a much smaller and even much more compact, and compared to the 10 to 18, this 10 to 20 millimeter that they just announced is also an f4, but is categorized as a G lens because it should be that much sharper and clearer when it comes to the image. I believe that this has to do a lot with the actual fact that it has OSS, or optical steady shot. For some of their G master lenses and like their 70 to 200, which they also just recently came out with an update for that lens, there's options where you have the ability to turn off the image stabilization that is applied to it, for the reason that sometimes with higher shutter speeds and trying to get longer focal ranges, that could actually be a disservice to your images. Okay, give me one quick second, because Aiden is just letting me know right now that his cartoons have given up, so I have to go take care of that. Give me a quick second, I'll be right back. There you go. Okay, and we are back. So with that being said, hopefully I didn't lose track. Okay, so that's why Sony came out with their new 10 to 20 millimeter to kind of one up their actual own 10 to 18. But like I was saying, yeah, that's where I was about the optical steady shot for longer ranges in photography and video. Mostly photography, it could be a disservice to have optical steady shot on, or OSS on, when you're taking certain types of photographs at certain shutter speeds, because it could actually bring in a certain blur or shake that naturally wouldn't be there, or that you would not even see, for the simple reason that your shutter speed is so fast. So if you're capturing anything at like 2,000th of a second or higher, because you're in sunlight and you're maybe trying to, photograph some sports or children, at that point it might be counterintuitive to actually have optical steady shot when it comes to photography, for the reason that it could actually introduce a motion that your shutter speed wouldn't even catch, for the simple reason that it's opening and closing so fast. When you're capturing an image at 1/2500th of a second, it actually is so fast that it doesn't have time to pick up blur, even if it was there, if that makes sense. So I will continue. But Sony did come out with the replacement for this 10 to 18, which is this 10 to 20, which will give you the equivalent of a 15 millimeter to 30 millimeter. So that's a good, like zoom range, especially when it comes to vlogging. This new lens is categorized as G because it doesn't have optical steady shot. So if you were going to be using it, I would highly recommend looking into the exact camera that you're using. The Sony ZV-E10, that one actually has a, what's it called, a like a digital stabilization that crops in a little bit more. But then you have also APS-C cameras like the A6600 or even the A6500, if you can find them, that have built-in IBIS. Now the 6600 is going to be a much better camera than the 6500, but it's not like the 6500 will actually be a disservice to you when it comes to this. Excuse me. So now, if you were to have one of these cameras, A65, A6600, ZV-E10, something with a stabilization, then this could be an ideal lens for you because you don't have to worry about it. Another thing that I would recommend that I think a lot of people forget, and now that we have, like you can see here, like I have my Mac Studio and we have these new M1 Mac computers, that there's an ability that we have to actually process these files a lot faster. So if I were to have a ZV-E10 with any of these wide angle lenses and I were to be doing vlogging and I wanted to get steady shots, then I know for a fact that what I'd be doing is be using the Catalyst Browse, which is the option where you can turn off all stabilization within the Sony cameras and use gyro information that's built into the camera to do post stabilization of your images, and it works really good. But some people don't like to add that extra, that extra layer to their workflow. So for that reason, people try to avoid it and do everything in camera, which I cannot fault them for that. At the end of the day, you always try to get it right in camera and you finesse it in post. But at this point, you have a variety of better options when it comes to the post stabilization, because depending on how bad the stabilization is that you need per shot is how much you can apply it per shot. And if it's something that you are okay with working into your workflow, then I think that that's something that a lot of people tend to forget when it comes to that aspect of the stabilization with these Sony cameras. But the reason why I bring that up is because none of these lenses that I mentioned, neither the 11, the 15, or the 10 to 20, have image or optical image stabilization, OSS as Sony calls it. None of them do. So what you're going to have to do is post, stabilize or tripod it, however it is that you're going to be using it. But you need to just be aware that if you're looking into these lenses, that's not something that's available if your camera does not have it. But there are even more options, because Sony also is one of the systems that they use, the one mount system, so to speak, where you could actually use APS-C lenses on full frame cameras and vice versa. The reason why I bring this up is because their full frame cameras all have built-in steady shot, which is another form of image stabilization. This is based on the sensor, which is called IBIS, and the IBIS sensor stabilization steady shot in these cameras can then be applied and used with all of these lenses if you decide to go that route. But it's still a much lighter and smaller lens, and you can get a very good image out of it. For the differences, like the cameras that you're seeing right now, this one here and my 16mm main camera, these are being used in 4K right now. And when being used in 4K, they crop in a 1.1%. So it just crops in just that little bit more into the image when it comes to the APS-C cameras, which effectively removes them from the Super 35 mode. Because the Super 35 mode, or what we would be traditional film cameras, the 16:9 aspect, is based off the full readout of this sensor. If I were to change it to 1080, I will get that type of look and readout, but it would be in the lesser degraded codec or file image at the end of the day. So to use the 4K on the A6100, it will have to punch in just a little bit more, and that's just to make sure that it has enough computing power to process the image and do it correctly. It all has to do with that downscaling from 6K to 4K image. My A7R2, that's my overhead camera, also does 4K. And when I put the camera in 4K, it cannot do 4K because it's a bit of an older system, an older machine. It does have 4K, but it doesn't have it for the full sensor readout. So it is a 42.2 megapixel extra megapixel sensor, and what it does is that it crops into an 18 megapixel APS-C to get that 4K image, because it can do a lot more readouts per second to get the higher quality image on a smaller portion of the sensor, thus giving you the ability to actually record in that mode instead of overheating the camera. Because trying to get a 4K image out of a full sensor readout of a 42 megapixel machine is going to be way more processing that camera has the ability to do. But the reason why I bring this up as well is because when I do use 4K into this, because it's a crop, it doesn't have that extra 1.1 added crop to it. So even though it's 4K, it is a full APS-C 35mm readout 4K. So there's variety. So if I were to use the 4K on this camera here, the image would just be a little bit wider because you're going to get that much more of a sensor readout. I think that pretty much covers the lenses when it comes to this aspect and how you can use them. Now I'm just going to touch into, before I get back to the chat, on who I think these are for. And I believe these are for the APS-C enthusiasts and the content creators on, of the future. One thing that I mentioned, I'm not sure if it was last week or the week before, was that Canon had come out with a couple of new cameras, the C7 and the C10, right? I believe that's what R7. Listen to me, C7. Whew, look at so many. What are TLAs? 3-letter acronyms. So many letters and numbers that it's just sometimes. Okay, so they came out with the R7 and the R10 cameras. These are APS-C cameras. One thing that was revealed to me after I made that live stream is that the new R7 camera, even though being an APS-C camera, is actually going to have some of the, Canon codecs available for video recording, and them being S-Log and in 10-bit. Now, I've always emphasized to my community here that there's, that you can get a full frame look out of an APS-C camera, right? You can. But one thing that I will never deny is the difference between 10 and 8-bit color space. Now, this camera, just like this camera, whether it's 24 megapixels or 42, they're working on an 8-bit color space. And when it comes to 8-bit is why I say there's really no need to be dealing with log footage or S-Log in 8-bit, because even if your camera had that capability, 8-bit of color space just isn't that much to actually start applying color grading. And that's why I revert going back to saying get it right in camera and finesse it in post, because I prefer to get my white balance and my colors and my image correct ahead of time so that I don't have to worry about that afterward, right? I don't have to actually color grade. But if that's something that you're looking to do, then I highly recommend getting a 10-bit, because that will allow you to take the file in 10 bits and push and pull the colors and, the exposure and things like that, that dynamic range that we're always looking to get, that is going to be found in that space. So Caleb Pike actually had a live stream not too long ago talking about the same thing about the new cameras. It was actually the day of the release, so it was Wednesday when Caleb had his live stream. And that's the first thing that came into my mind, was the fact that Canon is coming out, or came out with 10-bit on the APS-C cameras, which is something that I've been asking for myself, through here, like just screaming it out like an old man yelling at the clouds. But asking for something of that quality in the new side of APS-C. But we were all kind of like not sure exactly what was going to happen, especially if you've been following what Sony has been doing with that side. The fact that they've closed down the production on the ZVE10, the A6400, and the only one that they were still making was the 6600. Now, they released these new lenses, and they also have information that they're back in production for the A6400, which is great news. But my mind can't help to just speculate, right, and think about what is coming in the horizon. Now, I had mentioned even further behind, like in an older live stream, about Sony actually providing stacked sensors to actually increase readouts on APS-C cameras, and that they had a sensor available. And just not too long ago, we get the information of the new Fuji camera that is actually shooting 40 frames per second on a backside illuminated stacked sensor. So that sensor just came out to market on the new Fuji cameras. And now Canon comes up and tells us that they have 10-bit on APS-C, and Sony comes right back and drops these 3 lenses. And my hopes are that we see either a successor or, a successor to the entire 6000 series, and maybe start a new line of A7000 series with 10-bit APS-C with BSI dual stack sensors that can give us readouts, as fast, hopefully, and this is, speculating, as fast as they've achieved with their previous cameras, the smaller ZV-1, type of cameras that I believe have 240 frames, and it being a smaller sensor even has a 960 frames per second, which gives you like a second of like ultra slow motion. So the future looks bright, and that's what I'm excited for, and that's kind of like where I'm gonna close it out, that I'm really excited for the possibility in the future, because at least this is a really good sign that Sony has not abandoned their APS-C line, which I really would have doubted. I never really was worried because of their one mount to rule them all, but I'm really excited that they've put the emphasis in the glass and G series glass that is high quality, top of the line, lenses for the APS-C lineup that are extremely compact. And I'm calling it now, you're going to see a lot of those lenses on full frame cameras from here on out, for the simple reason that you can get the image stabilization handheld. And if they were already using a full frame camera, you could definitely get a much smaller lens and get the same type of image out of your machine. It's almost like a no-brainer. Now, the price is a little bit more than the competition that it is going against. Like, it is a $700 lens, the 15 millimeter, compared to the Sigma 16, which is like $400. So you will also have to depend on, where you want to put your money, right? You're gonna put your money where your mouth is. There's features of these new lenses like push buttons, and the 10 to 20 is just like I said, it's a replacement of the 10 to 18. They're both power zooms, which means there's a little rocker that will allow you to do the zooming in and out without having to move it. And with this new 10 to 20, it's also all internalized. So the 10 to 18, the previous model, it would actually extend the barrel to make the difference between 10 to 18 millimeter. This one is smaller, and all of the elements move within the system itself. So it's like I said, just exciting new stuff. I'm gonna get to your comments, but also let me know what you guys think about these new lenses. If you're excited, if you're thinking about getting one yourself, let me know. And yeah, let's get to it. All right, thank you, Kevin. Yes, please do. If you haven't done so already, please make sure that you hit that like button. Is highly appreciated. Okay, so let's see where we are. Okay, Carlos is here saying looking forward to getting to take on these lenses. Well, thank you. How you doing, Carlos? Thanks for stopping by. Okay, Kathy's also here saying hello to everyone. How you doing? All right, let's see. Let me change this up here. Let's see if we can move that there. All right. Okay, Sammy has a question. Oh, Kevin also says, I have the 12 millimeter f2 something Rokinon with autofocus. Okay, then if they came out with the autofocus lens, then that's one of the newer ones. So I'll look into that. The one that I'm familiar with when I looked into the Rokinon was a manual that was only found, or maybe I could stand corrected. Maybe that's for the full frame side. Maybe the autofocus was the APS-C, and that the full frame you couldn't find, or regardless. I'll look into that. Sammy has a question, says, what is the starting price on this new Sony lens? I don't have them off the top of my head, but we can look them up. So let me check here real quick. Actually, you know what? I'm going to do it on my phone so that I don't mess up anything when it comes to the computer and get everything wonky, because I already have it set up for Cities Golf later today. Yep. Okay, so let's start with that. The new 11 millimeter is actually $549, which that's actually a good price. The reason why is because that's the one that's actually not classified as a G lens. I guess because of the designation and it being an f1.8 and not being able to reach f1.4 as far as aperture, kind of eliminates it from that group. I think it's the same thing. But then I don't know sometimes, because the 10 to 20 millimeter is an f4, but that gets designated as a G lens. And now, just to be clear, there's a difference between G and G Master. G is just gonna have the little G in black, or like the outside is black with a silver G within it. The G Master, Golden Master series, that's where you will find the red tag or orange tag with the same G inside of it as far as the emblem goes, and those are their top of the line, best in class lenses that you can find for those cameras. So that's the 11 millimeter was $540 or $549. Okay, give me the full size one. The new 15 millimeter f1.4 Sony is $749. And last but not least, let's check the 10 to 20 millimeter. The EPZ 10 to 20 f4 is also $749. Okay, great question, Sammy. Thank you, because I could not remember. So both the 15 millimeter and the 10 to 18 power zoom are $750. The 11 millimeter f1.8 is $550, which is funny because from the lenses that I have currently, I was never the biggest fan of the 10 to 18, but if I would have been interested in one of these three lenses, would have been the 11 millimeter, which works out for me being the least expensive of the trio. All right, D's in the house saying what's up. Also, Mr. Sarkeesian is here. Thank you for stopping by. Caleb is here saying what's up and good night, and a good night to everyone. Excuse me. All right, saying Sony has been coming up with new APS-C sauce soon, because these companies have 10-bit APS-C and Sony is lagging. But introducing these lenses must mean something. I exactly agree. And this is the other thing. Sony is the one that's providing these sensors and these camera parts to these other companies. I always reference Sony to Apple, because Apple does the same thing through a lot of these manufacturers. Like, Apple is like Samsung's bigger brother. Like, they will never apply something until they know that their like little brother has perfected it. So even when it came to like OLED screens, right? OLED screens have been around for a long time, but if you dealt with any of the earlier, like iterations of that technology, you will also know that you were dealing with screen burn-in images and a lot of other difficulties that OLED brings on compared to traditional LCD. And it was only until all of those wrinkles, so to speak, were taken care of was when Apple decided to put OLED onto their iPhones. They wait. That's why, even me, I've made fun of Apple, saying like Apple then, bringing out something that's old and marketing it like they created it. But the difference is that once Apple puts it into their products, I have 100% confidence that it's going to work because they've ironed out all those wrinkles, so to speak. So when it comes to that, I think Sony does the same thing a lot, especially when it comes to their camera side, because they're such a huge company when it comes to electronics. And the imaging side is not only as far as cameras go, but imaging for doctors' offices and computers, all different types of sensors of imaging that Sony provides. And like I said, they provide sensors to all of these cameras. So this new bigger cameras that you're gonna find on the Samsung phones and all that, the actual sensors that are getting the readouts are Sony. So at the end of the day, you're taking a picture with a Sony camera, so to speak. And that's why I think like I don't kind of worry about it, because I know that once Sony comes out with it, they kind of tend to leapfrog the competition because they know what the competition's doing. They provided them the parts. It sounds crazy, but it's like there's no way that Sony will not know the capability of the sensor that they're selling to Fuji. Another question: what is a good ND filter for Sigma 16mm? Whenever I film outside, I turn the shutter speed down so it's correct and it looks pretty good. Okay, well, what I've been using for outdoor NDs really depends on, if I'm doing photography and video. In your case, I believe you're doing video, so I would have to recommend a variable ND, a VND. Why? Because you can adjust it on the fly, and it's totally different than you getting overpass clouds and it just totally like diffuses the light that you're using, and now your ND is too dark and it starts trying to shoot up your ISO and giving you a lot of extra grain in the image just because you're trying to keep the correct exposure. So when you're using NDs or variable NDs, as I would recommend for that scenario, you could adjust it so that you can keep your ISO and everything looking good and expose the image correctly. And that's why we also say we always prefer to use controlled lights over natural light, because natural light changes on the fly. Something as simple as that, as clouds going overhead, and it'll completely create an overcast image that you're creating. And if you do have your ND and you're not paying attention to it, your camera will compensate, and then when you get back, you'll see that you were shooting at 6400 ISO for no reason, just because you forgot to like adjust your ND. And the VND is a lot faster to make those micro adjustments than having to completely like screw off a filter and screw another one on with a different type of diffusion, so to speak, or actual density, not diffusion. Words, Lewis. All right, Paul is saying, please put a Q in front of any questions you might have. Yes, I appreciate that. Jim Mundy is in the house saying good evening to everyone. All right. Thank you, Sammy. Thank you for stopping by. I'm always happy to help. Sly is here saying happy Saturday to the crew. Hope you're doing well. I'm glad that you can stop by, and I hope that you're doing well. All right. John saying hi to everyone else that he's missed. All right. So Sammy's saying, wow, that's crazy. I'm not sure exactly which part. Okay, says, the Sony might do something even better for the Sony ZV-E10. New possibilities. Let's hope a firmware update, right? Like, I think that the processor is already there, but if they were to just do like an update on the ZV-E10 and give it 10-bit, oh, it's over. Because I'm emphasizing that again. There's such a huge difference between 8 and 10-bit. It's not even funny when it comes to this color space. It is like going from that 24 pack of Crayola that you would have to like billions of colors, to like the entire gradient, you know. And it's that much of a difference when it comes to the post-production and the colors that you can get in camera as well. Because if you can get correct colors with 8-bit, if you get correct colors with 10-bit, it's only gonna pop that much more. So imagine 10-bit codecs coming out of these cameras and then being dumped into these cam links 4K. That would be saucy. That would look so nice. Yeah, I'm with you. It says, come on, Sony. 10-bit stack sensor with APS-C body. Oh, give me an A7000. Give me an A7100 with specs similar to that. Are you kidding? All day. And that's the whole thing. It's just people forget the packing. And you know what? That brings me up to tonight's boom Cities Gaw channels that I think you should go and watch. Okay, tonight's Cities Gaw is none other than Justin McDonough, also known as Donna Did It. Okay, that's not what we were supposed to be on. Let me see. Is that what we're seeing? That was what I was watching. Okay, so let's close that. Yeah, watching car racing, right? There we go. Boom. There we go. Justin McDonough. Donna Did It. And I was over here saying, oh, because let me not mess with this stuff because I have everything prepped. All right. So this is Justin McDonough, also known as Donna Did It. Right now he's sitting at 185,000 subscribers. He's an amazing content creator. If you're shooting Sony cameras, you might have heard of him. And if you're shooting Sony cameras and you haven't, definitely give him a check out. Oh, I still have the Cities Gaw logo over this. Boom. Let's get rid of that so you guys can see it. All right. Everything's just going smoothly. Can't you tell? All right. So as you can see, he does Sony cameras and things like that. So he is a photographer, videographer. He's an amazing creator. He's actually a music producer by day. He has a studio, I believe, with his wife and another partner. And then on his downtime, he's a content creator for YouTube. He lives in Canada. He recently moved, so I'm going to divert by saying exactly who where he moved to, because I forgot which area he moved to now. But yeah, it's literally on the screen. It says I moved. It's right there on the screen. So he's an amazing content creator. He used to do a lot of live streams, which was a lot of fun for me because I'm a live stream junkie as well, and learned a lot from this said individual. I'm glad to say that we're pretty cool as far as knowing each other. I would hopefully one day hope to get to meet him. I just know that that's an eventuality that will eventually happen, so it's just gonna be really cool when it does. But once again, if you haven't checked out this man, I would definitely tell you to go check out Donna Did It, an amazing channel and an amazing content creator, both music, photography, video, and everything in between. So there we go. So Mr. Donna Did It. Let me go back to my live stream here. All right, and go back to my cameras. Boom. All right. So yes, let's see. It says, I think that's the new lens, and it's an APS-C lens. I'm not familiar with the full frame lenses. Well, that's the whole thing. You could use the full frame with APS-C and vice versa. So that's that one mount to rule them all, so to speak, system. And I absolutely love it because I've used my Sigma 16mm in 4K on my Sony A7 R2, and because the 4K shoots into APS-C, it's perfect for that lens. So putting a full frame lens is kind of defeats the purpose, right? But once I put that on there, I still have the active steady shot, inside, or steady shot inside. So now my 16mm lens becomes image stabilized for my B-roll footage, and I do it all the time. So being able to do with something lighter and smaller and still get the same results, I'm all for it. But 10-bit definitely would make things so much nicer. I don't need any of these lenses. I have the Tamron 11-20, the Sony 16-55G. I can't justify that lens purchase. I would have to agree with you, sir, because if I had those lenses, I would not. Because I'm also even thinking about the 11-20 on the Sony, the Tamron. I've only heard amazingly good things about that lens. It's just a little bit bigger and heavier, but not by much, because it's still that much smaller than my Sigma 16mm. It says it's a Rokinon AF 12mm f2, and they just launched them earlier this year. Definitely got to look into them. Thanks for that info, Kevin. Let me make sure that these things are coming on the screen. It says 749 is tough for the 15mm when the Sigma is like 374. Exactly. And even cheaper used. Exactly. I bought mine. How much did I think I got it for 300. I think I got it for like 300, maybe even less. I definitely bought it used. It was like in the box. So like it was this young girl that I was buying it off of from the OfferUp application, and she came out with her dad, to make sure that everything's safe and cool. But her dad was upset. Her dad's like, I can't believe she's selling it for that cheap, because he's the one who paid for it initially. But hey, I got the deal, and I've been very happy with it. But I'm so happy, in fact, that I'm even thinking about getting a second one. Getting a second 16mm. And now if these lenses just came out and somebody has that FOMO, might be dropping off and pick one up for like a couple $100, $250, might be a no-brainer, might be a no-brainer. Randall says, I'm interested in the 11mm for Sony myself. That would, out of all three of those, for what I have currently, that would be the only one that makes sense for me. Not only because of the price, but because of the focal length and the speed. Because getting a 10-20 at f4 doesn't do anything. And you know what? Going back to it, like D was saying, that the Tamron is actually a 2.8. Correct me if I'm wrong, right? Let me know, D. I believe that Tamron, 11-20 is a 2.8, so it's a faster, brighter lens. So it will definitely and it's less expensive. So let's see exactly how it performs. Pretty soon we're going to be seeing a lot of comparison videos out of all of these lenses. Kevin says, I feel the 12mm Rokinon is much higher quality to me than the 24mm. The 24mm feels plastic and the 12mm feels sturdy and well built. And I'm guessing you're comparing both from Rokinon. So it says, I feel that the 12mm Rokinon is much higher quality to me than the 24mm. This 24mm feels plastic, and the 12 just feels more sturdy and well built. Good info. Thanks for that insight, sir. Sammy says, thank you so much for the help. I've been seeing the Sigma 16 on Marketplace for around $275. Yes, look, I didn't even see that comment. I was just saying, I was like, hopefully they get there, because if you see it for $275 and you say, hey, I got $250 right now, I'll drive to you and pick it up, and just, oh man, that could be something that might be happening. Says, sounds like me on my A5000 I bought in 2015 from a 16-year-old kid that was just his dad's, just got me with the kit lens for $260. That's a great price. Oh, it's not coming up. Why? I'm clicking on it. There you go. Sounds like me and my A5000. I bought it in 2015 from a 16-year-old that was with his dad. Got it with the kit lens for $260. And you know what's the other thing? A lot of my cameras, because I've done a lot of like wheeling and dealing. Like I've met a lot of people that, believe it or not, buy these cameras because they think that they're gonna be YouTubers, you know, and they don't have the goal for it. They don't have the drive and the stick-to-itiveness, so to speak, you know, that ability to be able to just grind it out and know that it's a marathon. And when things don't work out, or it's something that's just a little bit harder than what they expected, because for those of us who are doing this, we know all the back-end analytics and, you know, like the stuff that goes in within the YouTube studio. And if you're not in the right mental headspace to take that on and know that it's like a marathon, then this will be a quick trip for you trying to do YouTube. So there's a lot of people that I've met that way, that I've gotten great deals on great cameras just because they bought it for something that they were going to try, and it didn't work out for them. It benefits me, so that's great. But that's why I always mention it to, you know, all of you, that if you were thinking about starting this journey, I would definitely recommend going into the used market first. Because if it's something that you're not even sure that you're going to continue, then why would you invest all the money? It's like, this is a really good analogy. Like, not everybody really buys brand new cars as their first vehicle, right? Most parents, when they're raising their children, they go and get a driver's license. Their first vehicle is most likely going to be a hand-me-down. There are the occasions, right? Let's not get into the lifestyles of the rich and famous. But, you know, normally, majorly, let's say, you're going to be dealing with a used car as your first vehicle. Something that's, you know, got a couple of nicks and dings. That doesn't make that vehicle not good at all. It's just your first vehicle, and you know that you would need to, there's a learning curve that you need to get over, and you don't want to do that in a brand new vehicle. And I've seen it because, like, I'm fortunate to say I saw someone get into an accident, like leaving a dealership, because they're just so hyped up their new vehicle that they're not paying attention to their driving. But I digress, because that's not where I'm thinking about taking this. I'm just trying to analogize the simple fact that if you're starting out new at something, don't hop in and getting the latest and greatest. Someone who's never driven and just got their learner's permit should not be behind the wheel of a Corvette, right? So I guess just using that as an analogy is why I constantly reference to say, hey, look into the used market, look into things that are still good, because just because they're not the latest and greatest doesn't mean that they're bad at all, especially when you don't even know how to use 8K, right? Like, people are over here buying cameras like, it's got 8K. I'm like, do you shoot 4K? No. Have you ever edited a 4K file? No. Then why are you worried about 8K? You know, there's like levels to this. So I guess that's just where I'll leave it. Okay. It says the Tamron is the f2.8. In my opinion, useless because you need the power zoom or the 10mm. I'd go Tamron. Yeah, I agree. Because you see, like, the power zoom is not what's gonna sell me on that lens. Like, the zoom equivalent, the 11 to 20, that is effectively a 16 to 30mm lens on the APS-C side. One of the most sought after lenses for vlogging in full frame is the 16 to 35mm. Most companies have them, Sony, Canon, so on and so forth. I don't think Nikon does. They're a whole nother breed, right? But they have something in that field, and that's usually, like we say, like YouTubers' preferred lens for full frame cameras. And now this is the equivalent in a 2.8. That's why. And this is something that most people don't know. Sony actually owns part or has stock in Tamron, which is kind of like that unknown little hush hush, like nobody talks about this stuff, you know, but it's the actual truth. And it's why that they have like insights to like the back end of how these lenses are made and how they're made for Sony cameras. And that's why these Tamrons work so well with the Sony cameras, that people are always amazed with the images that they get, because it's good glass and because they have the correct information to focus it correctly with these cameras. You're gonna get amazing results. So Kevin says, I saw a guy on Reddit looking for an 8K camera because his A7 IV was fuzzy. I was dying. Oh my god, you know, because this is another thing. Now that you mentioned that, right, let me make sure that that came up on screen so you guys can see it, right? So he looking for an 8K camera because his A7 IV was fuzzy. Like, A7 IV is this year's camera, not last year's camera. This year's newest tech camera. And I bet you that he has no idea how to use the camera. And I don't know anything more than this situation. I didn't even read the Reddit post, but let me give you an example. These cameras that you're seeing right now, this A6100, this A6100 over here, and my overhead camera here, my A7R4. I mean R2. Look at me, not the A7 IV is the one that we're talking about. All of these cameras can do 4K, and right now these are all 4K images. Go back to it, right? None of these cameras would actually be transmitting 4K footage unless you change the settings within the camera itself. Yeah, you said it right. Read the effing manual, right? Here we are. But this is the whole thing. Like, so these cameras, even though I go in and I go into my manual settings and I set the camera to shoot 4K and I shoot it at 30 frames a second and I put my shutter speed all in manual at 60 over a second, and then I have my ISO right where I want it at 200, and I take every step along the way, and I put everything 4K, and I come look at Ecamm and it's telling me you're receiving a 1080 image at 30 frames a second or at 24 frames a second, and you're like, what is going on here? Like, I set up my camera. Well, you set up your camera for recording, but like live streaming and sending a signal out to be recorded externally are two completely different things. So if I were to be using an Atomos Ninja V, right, external recorder is pretty much the same thing that I'd be doing if I were connecting it to the live stream, because you're sending the signal out, which means that you would have to take the camera and put all of the settings that I mentioned before in the camera so that you can get the best image. But then you have to go within the sub settings in these cameras themselves and make sure that your HDMI settings, what's being transmitted out, is also correspondent to the settings that you have placed already. So if your camera is now shooting at 30 frames a second compared to 24, you would need to go into your HDMI output settings and apply that and make sure that you're sending a 4K signal out, because even if you have 4K set on your camera, if you do not have your output to correspond with your settings in camera, you're not gonna get it. It's just gonna tell you, yeah, we're set to record 4K, but we're only transmitting 1080. See the difference? So that's where you would have to actually go in and set your output to 4K to make sure that you're receiving that crispy like image. So said individual, Mr. Reddit in this case, most likely didn't read the freaking manual, okay? And he had no idea that the Sony camera, even though has capability for 4K, super sharp, and actually downsampled from 7K. So it's a 7K sensor. I really, 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 really doubt that he was getting a soft image from that camera. That's 100% user error. He either had Vaseline on his lens or has no idea what he was doing. So let him look for 8K and let it think that it's gonna solve its problems. But it's just gonna have, you know, a much bigger file that his that his computer can't handle, and it's still gonna be soft because he just doesn't know what he's doing. So very well said. John says the best quality camera is the one that you know how to use well. Absolutely. Especially, you know, for photography, if you know how to get exposure correctly with your camera, that is the name of the game. That is it. And even in video, like, I've come to realize that that's it. The biggest, like, je ne sais quoi moment, right? When people look at my live stream and they're like, that looks amazing, right? It is the equivalent of a photo looking amazing. And I'm gonna mention this because I've, you know, spoken to other photographers, right, where they have to explain their vision in their photographs, right? And I've told them that if you have to explain your vision, right, if you have to explain why you think the photo is good, then it's not great. Because what we're shooting for is, like, what we're hoping for, I guess I am as a photographer, is a great photograph. Meaning, to me, you show the photograph to someone, whatever it may be, and they're gonna go, oh wow, that looks nice, or like, that looks amazing. They're not gonna ask you what type of camera, like, unless they are a photographer themselves, right? They will just, the question that you would get, be like, did you buy a new camera? You know, something like that. But a good image, a good photograph, a good anything, just like they say, a photo is worth 1,000 words. It speaks for itself. So that's what I'm gonna leave you guys with. I hope you strive for upgrading your skills, right? Strive to upgrade your skills to better know your equipment, or have a better comprehension of what it is that you're looking for before you look to have the equipment be the saving grace. Because at the end of the day, it's not, right? I know that I can get a really good image out of a vintage lens that's super soft. But when you shoot it with intention, then you know the strengths and weaknesses of that lens. You know the strengths and weaknesses of your camera, of your computer. Because that's a whole nother conversation, because I really want to emphasize that I've learned that the edit has so much more to do than, like, even the quality of image that you're able to record. I have to emphasize that. And you know what? Let me know what you guys think. You know, this is just, put it in the comments. I'll end up reading it. Next week, I had an idea of changing things up a little bit. I had an idea of maybe doing an edit, right, live on the live stream for one of my videos. Or the other thing that I actually had the idea to do was to actually do a live recording. So let me know what you guys think, you know, would you'd be more interested in. I'm probably gonna do a poll, or you know what, I'm gonna hold myself accountable. I'm gonna make a poll to see which one sounds better, like which one you guys would be more interested in. One of two options. Option one is that I will sit here and go through one of the scripts of my videos and show you how I would record it live to tape, right, so to speak, and then have that to show you like how many times I could mess up, and have that documented right on the live stream. And then I will go back into the live stream file and just pull that out and make my regular video as if I had recorded it to tape by myself. So that's the idea, so that I can show you, you know, the beforehand, kind of behind the scenes, like this is the raw ingredients, and then show you the edit on how to finish that up. The other option that I had, right, instead of recording it live, was to basically do an edit live. Basically just go through the steps of how I would edit that same said file on Final Cut Pro to produce a video for the channel as well. So it's an idea that I had that maybe could benefit you all who are looking to, you know, upgrade your skills in these same aspects, and also produce content for my channel, both for my live stream and then, you know, a video on demand content. So I'm like, that's kind of like 3 birds with 1 stone, so to speak. So let me know what you guys think about that. Okay, right now Kevin is saying, yeah, has everyone remembered to hit the like button? I would appreciate that. If you're still hanging out and you found value in tonight's stream, it costs you nothing. It goes such a long way to just hit that like button. It really does make a huge difference. Sly says, Lewis, you're amazing. You're such a wealth of knowledge. I hope everyone has a great week. Good night. Thank you, Sly. I can't wait to see you here next week. Video edit or photo edit? I was thinking video edit, like, because it was more like the video. So either like show you the recording side of it or show you the edit side of it. So let me know. It says go for the edit, says Randall. Okay, and so does D. He says edit. You see, that sounds cool. Paul says you could record 1 week and then edit the next. You see, that might be the plan. See, I say selfishly record next week because I'm traveling again. Then I will miss it so I can get the edit the following week. Hey, but you see, we're creating content for both. But I'm glad to get the feedback from you guys as well. Like I said, I'm holding myself accountable, so I'm going to put a poll out as well, you know, on YouTube to the community. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. That's what I'm gonna do. Just also, but I'm seeing here, it says I vote edit too. I enjoy Raphael streams when they have time to watch them, and I always learn something helpful. Okay, that sounds cool. Well, definitely the edit, but part of editing, right? Part of editing is having the ingredients to edit. And that's why I also said, like, I'm really excited because I've learned so much editing other people's footage and not having to wait for me to create my own ingredients. But when I do have them or have some time, I'm thinking, you know what, let's try to implement them both. So we'll see how it goes. I'm going to put the poll up and we'll see how it finished, but you guys will definitely know. If those of you who haven't, you know, joined my Discord, you're more than welcome. Right now things are under construction and we're just putting things in place, but this is a place where you can find all of the city's gauze, all of my past live streams, and you can communicate directly to me through there so that you can give me your information and what you think that you would like to see coming up for the channel itself or for future live streams, because your input is so highly valuable and I appreciate every single one of you for always taking the time for hanging out here with me on a weekly on the Camera Junkie live stream. You guys are amazing and you guys make all of this worth it week in and week out. Cannot stress that enough. So thank you as always for taking the time. Have a great week and I can't wait till we do it all over again. Next week we're probably going to be doing recording, just because it just sounds good to record 1 week and then show you the edit the next. And that will pretty much put, you know, into context what I have ready, which should give me the ability to get things set even better to produce those live streams. So that gets me excited as well. I can't wait for it, and I will see all of your beautiful smiling faces next week. All right, have a good one. Until next time.